And it is Time Walk Magic. We've got Forrest Camperman up against Raymond Perez. More of that Is It Drake's deck that you and I are just loving up against Golgari. Mid-range, really one of the biggest decks of this format, one of the most popular ones in the field of the Pro Tour as well as leading into the event.
Yeah, the Golgari mid-range deck, very customizable. Probably one of the most customizable decks in the field along with the Drake's deck. Essentially, you can choose what you want to beat, but you can't beat everything.
Mm-hmm. We see a Branchwalker come into the play. It's going to throw that cast down into the graveyard, and then it meets a shock. And it's going to join that cast down in the graveyard. Goblin Electromancer on the field now for Camperman. Perez heading into their turn, and there we go. Jade Light.
Yep, that's the typical curve. Wildgrowth Walker that we see here would have been the most key card to play on turn 2. It's very hard for these Drake decks to kind of deal with it. This one, the version that Camperman's playing, inspired by the, as put down on the deck list, the Viren Bros. But yeah, essentially, Wildgrowth Walker growing quickly out of size can be a real problem for the Drake's deck. The life gain matters. It starts becoming a threat. It starts becoming something you can't deal with. So it's something that Forrest has to consider here. But yeah, and it also seems like there was a mulligan. I only saw 3 cards being fanned out with that Goblin Electromancer in play, so there's a high chance that Forrest mulliganed in this game.
We're going to see a discovery here, and that is going to throw a couple of cards into the graveyard. We do have that cost reduction from the Goblin Electromancer, which is why you only saw 1 land actually tapping in order to play out that discovery. Looks like we were starting off on a mulligan to 5 on the side of Camperman. So we're going to fire down this op, taking a look at the top card, and we get to decide what to do with it. 1 mountain remaining as an option for this game, and it's going to be Shock. Take down the Jade Light Ranger, swinging for 2. Goblin Electromancer getting it done all by himself.
Yeah, and that, when an Electromancer survives, that's when the card looks very impressive. The problem is those games where it doesn't survive. If your opponent didn't have to pay much, then you just played a creature and didn't get the inherent value of the other spells. But yeah, you can see here the power of Wildgrowth Walker, gaining life while having a board presence, and you have to deal with it. It just gets worse over time.
That Wildgrowth Walker joined by Seeker Squire, cast down on top of the library, so there's a removal spell in the wings. Lava Coil is going to eliminate it before it gets out of hand. 4 toughness, able to be handled, and it's going to be Beacon Bolt as well, completely eliminating any sort of creature presence from Raymond Perez. Camperman now able to attack once more with this Goblin Electromancer. Perez down to 19 after we did gain that life because of the Wildgrowth Walker.
Yeah, but here, this is exactly the type of game that Raymond wants to play, on top of the mulligan. But even then, just trading 1 for 1 is totally fine because your creatures are exploring, you're gaining additional value as the game goes on. So you're more than happy for your opponent to be removing your cards 1 by 1. The main problem is if the Is It Drake's deck can do that plus deal pressure. That's when things can get worrisome. But all it takes is a key removal. If Raymond, I can't see Raymond's hand quite, but one of the key patterns in this matchup is if Crackling Drake survives the Vivian Reed turn. If Vivian Reed comes down, kills down Crackling Drake, the Is It Drake deck gets into a lot of trouble, especially without a Phoenix to, say, take down the Vivian Reed. But yeah, even something like a Carnage Tyrant in this spot can be rough, but at least Forrest can race the Carnage Tyrant. That Carnage Tyrant requires free attacks, unless this Llanowar Elves has something to say.
Oh, no.
And this combination of Drakes, that might get it done. This is a lot of damage coming in. I believe 7? So this is lethal next turn. Yeah, if I'm not wrong, that was 7 damage. And if Raymond doesn't have an answer for one of these Drakes, that would be lethal damage here.
2 Drakes now facing off against this Carnage Tyrant. This one not as not gifted with Sarah's wings like we saw the last time it was on the battlefield. So what can we see here? Camperman down to 9.
And Raymond should be down to 12. It doesn't seem to have been updated, but just if you're catching on and want to make sure, there we go, 12. Just so you understand the race. But yeah, here, the fact that Raymond couldn't attack with the Llanowar Elves means that the Carnage Tyrant is going to be that free turn clock. And Raymond forced the paths. In Forrest's seat, I would just obviously attack.
Yeah.
But expect something like a Vraska's Contempt. but understand that there's not much you can do, and you still want to attack because this is your only route to victory here.
And we are going to kick things off with a Tormenting Voice pitching a Lava Coil. We find an Arclight Phoenix as well. A couple of cheap spells might be able to get it done. You would need to combine it with likely a land as well if you're going to have one of those spells that puts the Phoenix in the graveyard. That's not going to happen. There was no removal spell. Camperman ends up just calling the bluff, attacks in, and takes game one very neatly.
I mean, it's obvious Raymond has to just pass the mana up, but there's almost 0% for Forest to not just jam here anyways. I don't it doesn't matter. Even if I thought my opponent had 2 removal spells, I would still attack because you can't stay back really, so you have to move forward.
If they're not blocking, they might as well be getting in the air.
Exactly.
All right, jumping post sideboard here, it is going to be Golgari mid-range, going with the Llanowar Elves, followed up by an island. How does this deck how is this deck going to try to adapt to this Is It Drake's deck?
You usually want to... The best cards you could have is Cast Down. So we already saw 2 Cast Down from Raymond Perez, and he's playing those as a mix of trying to fight this Drake's deck, but also, fighting the White Weenie kind of menace.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to adapt more, you want to max out on Wildgrowth Walkers. You want to max out on Cast Downs. You can even play something like an Assassin's Trophy or 2. Deathgore Scavenger is also a very key card. Being able to remove Arclight Phoenix, being able to gain life, deal pressure, it kind of does it all. But yeah, you want instant speed removal. That's what you want. But with Raymond Perez not hitting that second land drop,
oh no,
that is a big game for Forest here.
With a Llanowar Elf turn 1 and that Branchwalker didn't end up finding it, we threw the Vivian Reed into the graveyard. An effective card was definitely a signal of trouble in paradise, and now really struggling, needs to find some sort of resource. And Camperman, I mean, this is going to be really the moment where you have to try to take advantage of that kind of stagger.
Yeah, and if Camperman had access to a removal spell, it would definitely have been pointed at the Llanowar Elves. But the number of shocks that you have tends to go a little down against Golgari midrange. And that's now. Before it was better to keep Shock, but now you have to keep Lava Coil because these Golgari midrange decks are maxing out on the card Wildgrowth Walker. And Wildgrowth Walker is a card you need to deal with. But yeah, the land here, really important. Jade Light Ranger allowing Raymond Perez to make sure to hit that mana. And you see the difference. All you need is that one turn to slam down the Explorer creature. If Forest had a removal spell for the Llanowar Elf last turn, that Lava Coil was actually in hand, then that would have been one more turn for Forest, more advantage. But here Raymond goes J-Light Ranger, gets another land, is going to get to do a lot more land drops. And that's kind of the power of these Golgari decks, is they get to essentially make sure that they drop a healthy mixture of lands and spells, along with putting pressure with these creatures.
It's going to be Tread a Course there from Camperman, drawn 2 cards, is going to have to discard one of them unless he attacked this turn, but I didn't really see many attacks. We've got 1 Steam Vents open, could still play the land for turn. It's Radical Idea going to the graveyard, but that actually still can be used. It's got that Jumpstart ability, so Camperman can discard a card and pay that mana to cast the Jumpstart out of the graveyard. We're going to go ahead and Lava Coil to eliminate the Jade Light Ranger. It's right back to Perez, but now with a Branchwalker, a Llanowar Elf, and a land to follow it up, we're now approaching further 3-drop territory. No 4-mana spells, no 3-mana spells.
Yeah, and Forest forced to go for this Jade Light Ranger. It was very close between the Elves or the Ranger in this spot, essentially, but this was maybe just a shy bit too much pressure, and Forest Camperman forced to essentially deal with it. But we're going to see a really sweet line here with the Mirari Conjecture.
So Mirari Conjecture, one of these sagas, when it first comes into play, you grab an instant out of your graveyard and put it to your hand. The next turn, Camperman is going to be able to grab a sorcery, and then on the final turn, it's going to start. Anytime that you cast an instant or a sorcery, you copy that spell. What a powerhouse, and really feels like it lends itself to kind of a controlling strategy.
I call it a flavor house. Like, it's perfect. It's about researching the Mirari and learning about the arcane. And then over time, you start learning the arcane, the instant, the sorcery, and then you find the Mirari and unleash. A little bit of Odyssey Dominaria trivia for you fans out there. But yeah, I also love the synergy with the Mirari Conjecture and Discovery Dispersal, since you can get it on either half. But here, Forest clearly getting the Lava Coil back. and deciding to fire it off right away. And this was also, again, a close call with the Llanowar Elves. You've seen Raymond missing a land drop, not being able to cast spells. So there's a big question. Do you actually go for the Branchwalker or the Llanowar Elf? Because, after all, the Golgari mid-range deck doesn't really have reach. If you can deal with that deck's board and have that presence to, not take too much damage, then you can take over.
Yeah.
With Beacon Bolt in hand, I think here that the Llanowar Elf is such a tasty target that I would be very tempted to kill it, since Raymond Perez was not able to unleash a 3 or 4 drop. So killing the Llanowar Elf might prevent a 5 drop, something like Vivian Reed.
I'm really curious, by the way, about what the hand that was kept was. Because we saw missing that 3rd mana, and then the Jade Light Ranger came down, and that really got the 4th mana from that land. But even still, we have yet to see any 3 mana or 4 mana spell, and it's a pass back. Camperman, by the way, sitting on, did you see the draw off of that opt? It was Star of Extinction, which, if you cast it now, you could destroy 2 lands.
If there's an extra land, we're going to see big meteors falling. The end of the dinosaurs was twice.
Dang it.
But it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, here, though, I think Raymond kept a hand with a lot of removal, Merfolk, Branchwalker, and Jade Light Ranger, which, makes sense. But here, yeah, the power of this the Mirari conjecture, the 1, this is going to go very far. And, yeah, Goblin Electromancer going to make sure we're keeping the card flow coming. Oh. Tormenting Voice, discarding Arclight Phoenix, drawing 4 cards.
And now you only need 1 more spell, and you've got 2 mana. And, yeah, you're copying this. It's a cost to cast it. Oh, Cast Down is going to eliminate the Electromancer, and I wonder if that's a signal of what was kept in this hand. That was a little bit on the less exciting side. All factors of things that would interact with these Drakes, and Camperman is yet to play one.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some Drakes in hand, and with the Radical Idea in the graveyard, Forest for sure has access to that last spell. I mean, you're drawing also 4 cards. It's quite easy to imagine that we're getting somewhere. I would be very tempted to remove this Llanowar Elf, because at this point, Forest is very far ahead. Mm-hmm. So getting rid of the Elf in play and then leveraging these extra cards seems like a way to move forward. But deciding instead to Radical Idea, maybe with a second Arclight Phoenix, that would make a lot of sense. But no, just deciding to draw, because this is also drawing 2 cards, right? The Beacon Bolt would kill 1 creature, but the Radical Idea drawing 2 cards might have been too tempting here.
You got to go for the value.
I agree. And there's the shock. Yeah, the shock perfect deals with the elf. And now Forest Camperman with a ton of cards in hand.
If Perez doesn't find a land or make a play, Camperman does have the option of, doesn't get to destroy 2 lands, but you can just fire down the Star of Extinction to eliminate the Woodland Cemetery.
Yeah, and by the way, had to discard a card to hand size. But yeah, Raymond's hand is just mono removal. It just seems like it's a bunch of Raskus Contempts and Assassin's Trophy and the Elders Reborn. And
this blue-red deck just seems unstoppable against this Golgari deck.
Well, it definitely looks good if your opponent missed a bunch of land drops. I'm not going to lie.
This is just a trampling.
Yeah, game 1 I think was more representative in that sense, right? Like, Forest had mulligan to 5. But still managed to find a way just because the Golgari deck was lacking that Vivian Reed or that extra removal spell for the Drake, and it was very trivial almost for the Drake's deck to take over. This game, obviously, Raymond Perez missed so many land drops, even with these Explorer creatures, and Forest and then drew a bunch of expensive cards, and it was very easy for Forest to take over. Now we might as well get rid of the Elf, making this Drake very large, and Raymond is under all the pressure.
Difficult times we saw, just a little sequencing of going for that Electromancer before the Lava Coil.
Might as well draw 2 as well. No need to discard any more cards.
Unless it's the hand size at the end.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take that.
We draw, and I think we finally found a land.
Yeah, that is very late.
Oh my goodness. Overgrown Tomb, even to have access to it, needs to pay 2 life.
Let's contempt that Drake. Just for shows. But yeah, here, obviously, Raymond's at 12. This is 5 damage, and it's going to be pretty easy for Forest to lock this one down with the number of cards and number of Drakes. Forest just going to slam a Drake, probably slam another one, and easily take over this game.
And Drake, kick it back, swing for 5. Perez needs something incredible to not fall in this next turn of Camperman. We find Memorial to Folly, and there's the handshake. Camperman takes it down in 2, game 1. A nice little bit of exchanging back and forth. Game 2, 1 land into a Llanowar Elf, misses the second land, going with that Branch Walker, eventually finds a Jadelight Ranger, but really just no game plan on the left side once those lands were missed.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I want to re-highlight that game 1. Forest Mulligan to 5, and it showcased the power of the Drake stack where the Golgari mid-range deck wasn't able to find additional removal spells for those Drakes, and they got to take over.
Absolutely. Well, we've got some more Magic for you as well. Let's head on down to our last Time Walk match. And it is going to be Pat Cox up against Kenny LeClaire. And we're going to have, looks like Boros mid-range on the left side of the field up against Golgari mid-range. So both of these decks really trying to play to the middle part of the game. This is game 3 right now, but how do you feel about how the red-white matches up against green-black?
Just to be clear, because this is going to be important for people watching, and you're going to see that hand is like Justice, like Deafening Clarion, Settle the Wreckage. This is the Boros Angels deck. Well, this is not Boros Challenger. We're looking to go way over the top. Free copies of Aurelia Exemplar of Justice, 4 Rekindling Phoenix, 4 Lyra Dawnbringer. This deck is designed to beat the Golgari mid-range deck. With free Tocatli Honor Guards in the main deck, there's a clear plan, and that plan is to target these Golgari mid-range decks.
We saw History of Benalia. One of the tokens dies to cast down. The last one gets in a swing for 4, and now it is still a Knight with Vigilance going to continue attacking in, but not a whole lot of plays from either side of the battlefield just yet. Overgrown Tomb comes down, pays the life, down to 12 already for Pat Cox, who's going to play a Jadelight Ranger, seeing a Vivian Reed on top. Can either have that 4-3 Jadelight Ranger if we want to draw it, which we do. Back to Kenny LeClaire, he was going to Justice Strike, that it deals damage to itself equal to its power, and Resplendent Angel hits the battlefield, the flying 3-3. If any life starts getting gained, this is going to really start making a wave of angels, though Kenny's still got a little bit of mana needed for that.
Yeah, and also Kenny had a Rekindling Phoenix in hand. The lack of second red was actually a problem. Kenny's hand is full of removal, but not really many ways to put pressure. And you saw the problem here, but this Honor Guard, kind of a nice tide over, allowing Kenny to essentially make sure that, no Ravenous Chupacabra, for example, takes down the party. And you see that cast down on the Honor Guard, that was necessary for that Jadelight Ranger.
Yep, and Wild Growth Walker heads to the graveyard, and then we draw a land off the top, play it tapped, it's an Overgrown Tomb, and it's right back to Kenny LeClaire, 10-20. Mana advantage to Pat Cox, who also has that Jadelight Ranger. And it's going to be another copy of Justice Strike. Eliminates that, swinging in for 2, down to 8.
But yeah, Kenny has access to a ton of spells in hand. Just can't find that extra red source that would allow to unlock both the Phoenix and the Lyra Dawnbringer. And here, is this the... okay, Brontodon. I was going to say the Fur Jadelight Ranger would be a lot.
Ixalan's Binding eliminates that one, and now it is just the Thrashing Brontodon up against this 2-2 Vigilance Knight. I doubt it's going to be trying to get aggressive. That is a big old 3-4, which can actually eliminate the Ixalan's Binding if needed.
Yeah, and that's why I probably would have just targeted the Brontodon there. You're giving your opponent the bigger creature, but yeah, Doom Whisper, quite nice, but this Angels deck is relatively suited to deal with it. Just that the problem is those 2 Justice Strikes are not where they need to be to deal with it. And now the question is, Pat Cox might feel ahead. So at that point, do you worry about Settle the Wreckage or not? And just attacking here with the Brontodon, you can see that Pat, respecting the power and the potential of Settle the Wreckage, decides to just attack with the Brontodon, develop the board, get the card advantage maybe from Doom Whisperer, and just staying back, defending Vraska Golgari Queen.
Plus it up, chooses not to sacrifice a permanent. It is a You May ability. And we are going to play down, finally, the last red source acquired. We have got a Rekindling Phoenix on the battlefield, able to block really well. It's a 4-3 with flying. However, when it dies, it creates this little elemental called the Egg, or often nicknamed the Egg, on which at your next upkeep is going to retransform into that Phoenix from the graveyard.
Yeah, but here the Doom Whisperer has, trample and gets this smash in. But I think the way that the game is developing, there's a high chance Pat Cox doesn't even want to attack, because Pat doesn't have access to as many cards as Kenny does. So just being able to control the board, but with the Vraska's Contempt, Now it becomes very tempting for Pat to just deal the damage here with the 6 damage from the large demonic nightmare flyer.
It's 11 all now, and that Phoenix is not going to be coming back. Vraska's Contempt, notably, is an exile ability, so nothing in the graveyard to be returned, and it doesn't even create that egg. But another Rekindling Phoenix jumps into the fray, and it's going to be up to Pat Cox to try and respond to it once more.
But yeah, we can get back that Wild Growth Walker, which to me says that Pat has access to, well, essentially...
I mean, Doom Whisper and Wild Growth Walker together, you pay 2 life to surveil.
Yeah.
But then you can gain that life back if you end up finding some of those Explore creatures.
Yeah, exactly. If you end up drawing them. They're pretty nice synergy, and that's why it's nice that Wild Growth Walker specifically mentions Explore, not top of the library. Because that would have been quite a combo.
Oh, if it was just anytime the top card goes to the graveyard.
Or it gets looked at. Yeah, that would have been spicy.
Good with Experimental Frenzy.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to lose that one. It is now in the graveyard, and we are going to eliminate that one. Deafening Clarion comes down to deal 3 damage to all the creatures, and it is a lone Doom Whisper, but with 4 mana available. Let's see if Pat Cox is able to sniff out that Settle the Wreckage that's in the hand of Kenny.
Yeah, played around it earlier. Now it's going to be a little harder with Kenny having access to so much mana. But that Vraska Golgari Queen still gets to stick around, and put pressure on Pat deciding to take a ton of damage just to find the right card.
Wow. That is a lot of damage.
Yeah. But between the Vraska Golgari Queen and you can get back the Wild Growth Walker, which you would board out, though, a fine finality in a matchup like this. A lot of exile removal and the finality side not as good against these Boros decks. But yeah, here, the Vraska's Contempt going away, interestingly enough, it's pretty good against the threats that the Boros mid-range deck has. But that showcases to what degree Pat believes in being the aggressor.
Lots of mana available there for Kenny. Still has this Vraska. Could ult it, in theory. Maybe not the most necessary thing, but it looks like we are going to go for it. Anytime that one of these creatures deals damage, now every attack is lethal. Settle the Wreckage, eliminating that Jadelight Ranger. It gets an emblem, and that emblem says that whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. That means that now this Llanowar Elf is a lethal attacker.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how Pat is going to play around Settle the Wreckage.
There's the handshake from Kenny. Pat Cox with Vraska Golgari Queen is able to come up with the win in Game 3, making him the match winner here in Round 3 of Grand Prix Milwaukee. But that is going to do it for this round. I'm TJ Rogers. This is Eduardo Sajkalik, and we'll be right back with Round 4.